Good evening, Penguins fans. Happy Wednesday, the day before another big game for this team as they try to bounce back from Monday's loss against the Montreal Canadiens. For today's episode, we're going to go over some practice updates. Nothing much to report, but Teddy Blueger was still out there practicing. They'll have an update on whether or not he's going to be playing on Thursday, or if he could be playing on that massive road trip that they have coming up after that. We're also going to preview the game against Los Angeles, go into their lines, look at their numbers for how they've done this season so far, and we'll also get into the road ahead for the Penguins and look at that big road trip that they do have coming up after this game on Thursday. So that's all coming up right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So getting into some practice updates since I last spoke with you all. It's very funny to have that episode posted at like 12:30 because during times on Tuesday, I'm like, don't I have to record right now? But I'm like, oh no, I recorded the recap right after. I hope you all enjoyed listening to that one. If you like my X's and O's, let me know. If you didn't, and I need to explain better, also let me know about that as well. The Penguins had the day off on Tuesday. They were back at practice on Wednesday. And for the most part, the lines were basically the exact same. Gensel, Crosby, Raquel, Zucker, Malkin, Russ, Heinen, Carter, Kapanen. The fourth line is the same. And then defensively, everything is the same too. Blueger was skating with Trevor Moore. So it looks like as of right now, Teddy Blueger is not going to be playing on Thursday. He's been day-to-day for the last 2 weeks now, but as I told you all about on an episode about a week ago, Blueger spoke to the media and he said that this injury is just not healing the way he thought it was going to, and it's been really frustrating him. And I know some people have been asking me about who's going to come out of the lineup when Blueger's ready to go, and you all know what I would do. I would take out Archibald and move Poehling to the left wing, put Blueger at center, move McGinn to the right wing because he can play either wing. Maybe you want to move Poehling to right wing to see how he does there, but Ryan usually plays on the left. I would feel a lot better about the fourth line with Blueger centering in and then Poehling and McGinn to the left and right of them, because I actually thought Poehling played pretty well against the Canadiens, and it was on a 5-on-5 rush, about a few minutes remaining before Cole Caulfield tied the game. And he split the defenseman going down, had a nice little mini breakaway, wasn't able to score a goal past Sam Montembeault. But, those are the kind of rushes that I'm like, okay, maybe there is something there with Poehling. So I haven't seen that kind of burst yet from Archibald. I know it's been a very small sample size so far, but I've been impressed with Poehling a little bit more than Archibald. So that's what I would do. For those that keep asking me about, who comes out of lineup when Blueger is ready to go, I keep Poehling in and Archibald as the 13th forward. But I also think, as I've said about that 7,000 times on this episode or this podcast, they're probably just going to do a rotation if the forward group is really healthy. Special teams wise, power play 1 is the same. Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Gensel, Rust, and then power play 2, Carter, Raquel, Zucker, Heinen, and Petrie. I'm not really going to put too much stock into Carter being on the second power play unit. I think he's fine, especially as an offensive presence. Penalty kill 1, Ryan Poehling, Brock McGinn, Brian Dumoulin, Jan Ruta. PK 2, Kasperi Kapanen, Josh Archibald, P.O. Joseph, Marcus Pettersson. So, my big question is, these are their 2 penalty killing units, right? Why was Carter on the ice for that game-winning goal from Kirby Dach in the 4-on-3? Do you trust him a lot more, say, I don't know, over a Jan Ruta, over a Marcus Pettersson, POJ, Kasperi Kapanen? Because that was a bit weird. Archibald was another one of the players on the ice, and then Dumoulin was the other player on the ice too with Carter. So I don't mind, Archibald, he was fine on that play, as I explained. Dumoulin, we all know that he didn't look bad. Well, he looked bad on that play and the game tying goal, though. His numbers with Chris Letang this year have actually been pretty good. I think like high danger chances wise, they've outscored the opposition like 13-1, and they have like 65% of the expected goals. So I think a lot of that is obviously Letang, But still, the penalty kill configurations, when I see it at practice today, it doesn't line up with what Mike Sullivan is doing in that kind of, game-breaking situation, I guess is how I want to say it. So definitely a little bit weird there. I would have liked to seen, Kapanen out there, maybe POJ. I mean, I think Jan Ruta would have been a better bet than Brian Dumoulin. I think for Carter, I would rather had McGinn out there because at the time, Petrie was in the box. That was his third penalty that he took. And yeah, he was not good in that game either. Second penalty, I'll kind of cut him some slack a little bit just because that second penalty was not interference. It was a total crappy call when the Penguins were on the power play about halfway through the third period, and it looked like just an even up call, if you ask me. So take that penalty aside, the other two he can't take, especially the one in overtime, with the Penguins carrying, well, I wouldn't say they were carrying the flow of play, but they were going back and forth with Montreal. I know the Canadiens were missing some chances, but the Penguins, they were also getting plenty of chances. The biggest one was Malkin missing just to the right side of the net. I think it actually glanced off Montebo's glove and went to the side. I think if Malkin's able to put that a little bit more inside, I think there was a little bit of a hole there, and he was hopefully going to be able to get the hat trick. Otherwise, that's basically it when it comes to the full practice updates. Again, Mike Sullivan said Teddy Blueger remains day to day. He said he hasn't been fully ruled out for the game on Thursday, but it's not looking good right now. The last thing I do want to say for this segment, just a little practice segment, as Danny Shirey reported, and I think the Penguins tweeted it out, Rickard Rakell has cut his hair. Yes, this is counting as breaking news for this podcast. I'm sure he's going to grow back out, but his wonderful flow is no longer with us right now, but give it another month or two, and I am sure it will be back. So again, no forward line changes, no defensive line changes. I would expect Tristan Jarry to start against the Kings, especially after the Kings came off that comeback win against the Nashville Predators on Tuesday. I'm going to get a little bit into that coming up in the next few seconds. But so expect the same lineup, same defensive configuration, same forward lines, and Jarry this time will be a net over to Smith. I think you'll see Casey start not the game in Columbus. I think they're going to give that to Jarry, but they have a back-to-back early next week when they start the Western Canada trip. Monday, I believe it's Monday, Tuesday. He'll start one of those two games, if I had to guess. I think they also have one on the weekend. I think that's the Vancouver-Seattle back-to-back. I think the first one, it's like Edmonton-Calgary, and then they have the other one before they come home next weekend. So I would expect, honestly, DeSmith to get at least two more starts coming up in this next week here. And, after the way he played against Montreal on Monday, I would continue to get him more starts because he was one of their best players. He continues to play like that. I know everyone's kind of freaking out about the first goal. Sometimes it happens with him. It happens with all goalies at times as well. Crap happens, but he kept them in the game. He made a lot of, dazzling saves, and he deserves to keep starting and to keep giving Jarry breaks when they are needed. So that wraps up this first segment of today's episode. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to go into a full preview for the game against the Kings, some keys to win for the Penguins, look at their lineup, look at the Kings' underlying numbers, and all of that jazz. But before we start talking about that, BetOnline is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Yes, the NBA got underway on Tuesday. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. You can head to the website today or use your phone to learn more. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So getting into the game against the Kings on Thursday, this will be the first of two meetings between the Penguins and the Kings. They'll play them again. I believe the California trip is, I could probably check that right now. I think it's like in December or something like that. It's a ways away. I'm just actually checking to make sure here when that is. Actually, no, I apologize. It's in February. My apologies on that. So long ways away before they'll play them again. This is a very good Kings team. They came from behind to beat the Nashville Predators on Tuesday night. They were actually down 3-1 in that game going into the third period. So the Predators, they also had a 2-goal lead. They blew it to the Kings, no score in overtime, but then Kings were able to win the shootout 1-0 thanks to a Gabriel Velarde's shootout goal to lift them. Cal Peterson started that game for Los Angeles. And this is a team, they're in win now mode. They had a mini rebuild, but mainly a retool for the last several years. And then this past year, they finally got back into the playoffs for the first time. I believe the last time was 2017, 2018. And they pushed the Oilers to the brink. They're up 3-2 on them. Lost game 6 at home, went to Edmonton, lost game 7. But that was still progress for them. They could have won that series, but they went out. They said, that's not enough. And they went and got a very good player in Kevin Fiala. And right now he is on the top line with Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe. Fiala is, I think, one of the main pieces that they've been missing. He's a do-it-all player, can score goals, make, can play well in the defensive zone. He was electric in Minnesota last year, had over 80 points, if I'm not mistaken. Very, very good player. Just a few years ago, not really many people knew who he was, but I think a lot of people do now. He is a legit top, at least second line to a legit top line player. Kopitar, he's not what he used to be, but he's still kicking. Great defensive center, can also chip in offensively. He's probably going to be going up against Sidney Crosby for most of his shifts. I'll be curious to watch that. Adrian Kempe, also a very good player. Trevor Moore, Philip Danault, Victor Arvidsson on their second line. Danault, remember, they signed him on free agency last season. Very good two-way center. That was a big signing for the Kings because they needed someone else to be able to take the pressure off Kopitar because he can't do it himself. He's getting up there in age. I mean, he's going to be 40 soon. So I know he's one of the best defensive centers in the league and probably one of the best defensive centers of this generation. But as he got up there in age, I think Rob Blake noticed, okay, I need to go out and sign a center that is maybe not as good as him, but it's still a really good defensive center. And enter Philip Danault. He did everything in Montreal. I mean, when he was there, I think with Tatar, Gallagher, I think, was on his line. They had one of the best top lines in the league. Defensively, he's outstanding. And his metrics are through the roof every year. When it comes to defensive zone, he can also put the puck in the back of the net. Good playmaker. I mean, if your 1-2 punch is Kopitar and Danault, you're doing really well. There's a lot. I mean, how shall I say this? There's not many better 1-2 punches in the league, I will say, than that. Victor Arvidsson, they traded for him from Nashville. Slow start to last year, but was able to come around a little bit. I'm curious to see how much more he produces for them this year. Trevor Moore, also pretty decent player. Gabriel Velarde, another young player in their lineup on their third line. Quentin Byfield, the former number 2 overall pick. Finally time to see what he has. Hasn't had a big annual sample size last year. I think he played a lot last year in the AHL. He's also been banged up at times, but he's made the team full-time. He is their third-line center. It's time to see what the Kings have in him. Carl Grundstrom, Brendan Lemieux doesn't really do anything on the fourth line. Blake Lazar, and then Arthur Kaliev. So the fourth line, not really much there, just like the Penguins. But Kings top 9, a very, very deep forward group and a team that I definitely have making the playoffs this year. Defensively, Mikey Anderson, who is not a bad player. I wouldn't have him on my top pairing, but he's definitely not bad. Drew Doughty, I've thought for a long time that he was very overrated by a lot of hockey pundits, but he had a really good resurgent year last year. His shot attempts per 60 percentage went way up, scoring chances, high danger percentage, everything about his game, even his defensive metrics, which were in the tank for the last several years, they went way up last year before he got hurt. So it was definitely a renaissance season for Doughty. I'm really curious to see if he can repeat that this year, because before that, everyone was, a lot of people in the analytics community and other people that aren't in the upper, I guess, echelon of the hockey media were saying oh, he's kind of washed at this point. But last year kind of proved those people, including myself, very wrong. So he's always a tough player to go up against. Sean Durzee's back there, Sean Walker, Goaltending wise, they have Cal Peterson and Jonathan Quick. Not really sure which one is going to start. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be Quick. And then their injuries right now, Alex Edler, the former Vancouver Canuck, and Alex Iafallo. Numbers wise, at 5v5, they only had 47% of the shot attempts per 60 this season. They have 52% of the expected, actually, no, not 52% of the expected goals. Yeah, actually, no, they do. Sorry. 52% of the actual goals, 47% of the expected goals, 46% of the scoring chances. So their numbers, not where they were last year, but it's also a really small sample size. But I would be stunned if they were not way higher next year. I think the big keys for the Penguins in this one, you got to jump on them early. I understand that the Kings just came back from a 3-1 deficit, but they're not going to be able to do that every game, especially if they keep playing like that. I mean, you're going up against better competition. The Penguins, I actually want them to jump on them early and have like at least a 2-goal lead or a 1-goal lead going into the third period, because I want to see if they can defend it. They didn't do a good enough job against the Canadiens. It was actually their first loss in 4 years, regular season wise, when they blew a 2-goal lead going into the third period against Montreal. So I mean, I would love to see them try to defend another lead this time at home. Defending leads was a little bit of an issue last year. So I really hope the Penguins are practicing that in practice and just making sure they have the fundamentals. You don't want to turtle like they were against the Canadiens, because even a team like that, and I know they're pesky, they play like rats. Marty St. Louis is going to have them competitive every single night. You can't turtle in this league unless you're playing Arizona or something like that. It's not going to work. So that's I think a one big key is if you jump on them early, make sure you're defending well and all that. Make sure you're firing a lot of pucks at the net towards Jonathan Quick. He's not as good as he used to be, but he's still, I think, I wouldn't say one of the better starters, but he's at least an average starter in this league if he is indeed in the net. Obviously, you got to neutralize their top line with Kevin Fiala and Anze Kopitar. Fiala is going to drive a lot of their offense this year. Kopitar, he can still bring it too. Kempe was one of their better goal scorers last year. Again, I think Sid is going to be going up against that line. So if you can neutralize that line and then they send out maybe like the Trevor Moore line against Gino's line, I think the Penguins can definitely take advantage. Well, I think they can take advantage of that, even though Danault is one of the better defensive centers in the league with how Malkin is playing to start this season. I think he can definitely hold his own up against Danault if that's what Mike Sullivan wants to do. Third line, I think the Penguins have the better line there. Byfield, still not fully sold on him just yet. Velarde, Grundstrom, they're not terrible, but I mean, I think with Heinen, Carter, and with how Kapanen they've all started the season, I think the Penguins have the edge there. So line matchups, I think the Penguins can definitely break even, if not, be a little above 50% with all the numbers. But, it's all about, getting the chances and then, of course, finishing the chances. Special teams battle, I think that's probably my last key that I have. Kings power play, it's usually not bad, but, they usually do have a pretty decent penalty kill the last several years. So those are my main big keys to winning this game. They're a very well coached team. Todd McClellan's been doing this for a long time. And this is definitely a matchup that I'm really excited to watch, because I think the Kings, they're no longer that old, slow team. They can skate with anyone. They got the top six. They got the depth. Their defense is fine. Jonathan Quick, if he plays the way he did last year in the regular season, they're going to be a tough out, especially if Drew Doughty doesn't get hurt this year. I think his injury really screwed with them a lot last season when he went down. So that wraps up this full preview of the game against the Kings. Coming up in the final segment, we're going to go into the road ahead for the Penguins and why it's definitely going to get a lot more difficult coming up. So stick around for that coming up after this final commercial break. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So coming up after this Kings game, this is a big road trip coming for the Penguins, a 5-gamer. They go to Columbus on Saturday. Then they have Edmonton Monday, Calgary Tuesday, Vancouver Friday, that next Friday, Seattle that Saturday before they finally come home for Halloween. So they're going to be on the road for a full week. So this is going to be basically 5 games in 8 nights. Only 3 days off. That's the Sunday when the Steelers play, next Wednesday, and then next Thursday. So 2 sets of back-to-back. Again, I think they'll go Jari on Saturday. Edmonton, I think they actually might go Jari just because it's McDavid versus Crosby. Calgary, I think they may go DeSmith. And then Vancouver, they'll go Jaris. I think Seattle, they'll go DeSmith. At least that's how I think the goalie rotation is going to go. Then after that, they come home to play Boston. Buffalo has been a tough out so far. They actually just beat the Oilers on Tuesday night. They have Washington after that, Toronto, Montreal, another 3-game road trip. Toronto, I mean, 14 of their first 19 games this season are on the road. That's ridiculous. I mean, I don't think I've ever really seen a start to the schedule like this for as long as I've been following or covering this team. It's not. So the Penguins, they were good on the road last year. They're going to have to be just as good, if not better, on the road this season too, because they do not play a lot of home games, especially in this is funny enough. Tomorrow night, it is October 20th. This will be their final game at home in the month of October. They will only play 3 games at home in October. And then in November, honestly, there's still plenty of, road games there. I mean, it's a tough schedule. Obviously December, they have a massive, actually, no, it's at the end of November. They have I believe it's like a 7 out of 8 stretch where they're playing at PPG Paints Arena. So it obviously all balances out. But I just want everyone to be aware just how big the stretch is here coming up for the Penguins. They're going to have to keep, gaining points, especially on the road. They're playing some really good teams coming up. I love the Western Canada trip. It's easily, I honestly, I think it's better than the California trip, especially now when the teams are really fun and they're usually really good. Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver. I know they're not having a good start to this year. They've blown so many 2-goal leads, but I always like playing them just because their fans at their arena are awesome. Seattle, not that good of a team, but they could potentially be a little bit better this season. But that's mainly the road ahead here for the Penguins. There's a lot coming, and I hope you all keep it right here on the Locked On Penguins podcast. Real quick, players who I think could be X factors in this game against the Kings. Really looking for Jeff Petrie to have a big bounce back game. He was really good in the first 2 games, especially against Tampa Bay, where he was moving the puck up the ice, firing the puck to the net a lot more, not taking stooping penalties. I think he could be a major reason why the Penguins win this game against Los Angeles. Obviously, the top 2 lines, big X factors too. And then I'm also looking forward to seeing Chris Letang bounce back. There's always some weird people that come into my Twitter mentions that say like, oh, he usually has way more than 5 to 7 bad games per year. And it's just like, okay, these people, they're the people that give him all the blame, but they never give him any of the credit. And, again, my saying is, if you don't think Chris Letang is that good at hockey, I question all of your hockey takes, to be honest with you. But again, that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Hope you all enjoyed it, especially the preview against the Kings. We're looking forward to that game. The next episode will be on Thursday evening with a full game recap of that episode. And then Friday, I'll be previewing the game against Columbus, going into their lines, looking at the history with that rivalry. I guess it's kind of a big brother, little brother thing at this point, and why the Penguins have just dominated them over the years. So again, thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be back with you all on Thursday evening.